How's it hanging, folks? This week, Tennessee completely defunded Planned Parenthood, joining Nebraska to do so. That's good news. Also, Women's March has proven beyond any shadow of a doubt that they are run by radical secularists by supporting Backpage.com, and the New Yorker has warned the public of Chick-fil-A's quote-unquote creepy infiltration of New York City. I'm Ryan Everson, and this is the Catholic Millennial Show. So Tennessee has joined Nebraska in fully defunding Planned Parenthood, which is exciting. Also of note, they did not take Planned Parenthood's funding out of the budget entirely. They just reallocated it to other healthcare providers, including pro-life crisis pregnancy centers that don't provide abortion. So this is the compromise that I called for in the article we published on the Catholic Millennial earlier this week. Republicans aren't totally happy because this money is still in the government's hands. Democrats aren't really happy with it because it's taking money away from Planned Parenthood. But with that compromise, it's more likely that you're able to get something to pass, something to change, because the alternative of just having all this money going to Planned Parenthood is the worst possible option. So even though it's unfortunate that the politicians, our lovely politicians in Washington, D.C., didn't try to do this, at least Tennessee's taken the action Nebraska already has, and we have more states looking to do the same in the rest of this year, so we'll be keeping tabs on that. In other news, we mentioned on the show last week, Backpage.com got shut down for sex trafficking, including the trafficking of minors, including money laundering, and numerous other things. There was a 90-something count indictment brought against them. So, despite these atrocities, the Women's March has come to the defense of Backpage in the name of protecting sex workers' rights, saying that this shutdown is, quote, an absolute crisis for sex workers, close quote. They also retweeted this from the Collective Action for Safe Spaces, saying that the shutdown is, quote, motivated by a patriarchal notion that women should not be able to do what we want with our bodies, close quote. Okay, so first let's address this patriarchal notion idea. I truly do not understand how you consider this to be anything sexist or patriarchal about this situation, other than the fact that men at Backpage have coerced women into so-called sex work that they didn't want to do, and they have pleaded guilty to doing so. That's the real patriarchal notion in this equation. To say that shutting down Backpage is the result of a patriarchal notion doesn't pass a smell test. As we mentioned last week, and as I mentioned in my article on this week, the Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act, which was created with the intention of targeting Backpage, passed with overwhelming support from both parties in Washington, D.C. The Senate passed it 97-2, a vote of 97-2. How often does that happen? I've got issues with our current Congress, believe me, but to say that 97% of the Senate is passing patriarchal legislation is nonsense. If you truly think this bill is patriarchal, you can go to Senator Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Dianne Feinstein, etc., and tell them that you think they're part of the patriarchy for passing this bill, and let me know how that goes for you. This was common sense legislation that almost everybody voted for. Second thing, while there's certainly a distinction to be made, the line between sex trafficking and prostitution is not black and white. For example, looking back at this tweet from Collective Action for Safe Spaces, they first say, quote, people choose sex work for a wide range of reasons, close quote. But a few lines later, they say, quote, there are also many people who engage in sex work, only option available to them while experiencing homelessness, close quote. That's not a real choice. Secularists glorify sex work in the name of choice, but the reality is that a lot of women in this lifestyle feel like they have absolutely no choice. And we see the same scenario with abortion. Women get into prostitution because they feel like there is no other choice. They get abortions because they feel like there is no other choice. This is an action not of liberation, but of desperation. So on all these comments from Women's March and from Safe Spaces DC, etc., these were all made about a week ago. 1 week later, so now, Backpage has pleaded guilty to their crimes. So by this point, if Women's March was really against sex trafficking, then in light of their support for Backpage a week ago, it'd be reasonable to expect them to release some kind of clarification in regard to their previous remarks, which were nothing but affirmative of Backpage. They should at least condone those parts of what Backpage has done that was illegal and clearly disgusting, and they've pleaded guilty to. They should at least acknowledge that, but that hasn't happened. They've stuck to their guns of supporting an organization that is guilty of all this perverted nonsense, including the trafficking of children. Women's March is not protecting women. They are doing the exact opposite. Now jumping from the Women's March to the New Yorker, who said just a couple days ago that Chick-fil-A is spearheading a quote-unquote creepy infiltration of New York City. Here's the excerpt from the article that articulates what the New Yorker is really upset about. The brand's arrival here feels like an infiltration, in no small part because of its pervasive Christian traditionalism. Its headquarters in Atlanta are adorned with Bible verses and a statue of Jesus washing a disciple's feet. Its stores close on Sundays. Its CEO, Dan Cathy, has been accused of bigotry for using the company's charitable wing to fund anti-gay causes, including groups that oppose same-sex marriage. We're inviting God's judgment on our nation, he once said, when we shake our fist at him and say, we know better than you as to what constitutes marriage. The company has since reaffirmed its intention to, quote, treat every person with honor, dignity, and respect, close quote, but it has quietly continued to donate to anti-LGBT groups. When the first standalone New York location opened in 2015, a throng of protesters appeared. When the location opened in a Queens mall in 2016, Mayor Bill de Blasio proposed a boycott. No such controversy greeted the opening of this newest outpost. Chick-fil-A's success here is a marketing coup. Its expansion raises questions about what we expect from our fast food and to what extent a corporation can join a community. Okay, so a few things on this. First, New Yorker and similar organizations and public figures often push these secular agendas in the name of diversity and inclusion. And they don't even try to actually live up to this mantra of theirs, and here's why. As stated in the article, the company has since reaffirmed its intention to, quote, treat every person with honor, dignity, and respect, close quote. The leaders of the company believe that marriage should be between a man and a woman. They're not outside of marriage. Like, we agree that all people, including people who identify as LGBT, need to be treated with respect and acknowledge. I'll acknowledge that a lot of times in the past that's really not been done, and even today there are times where that's not been done. But aside from the act of marriage, everything needs to be respectful, and anyone who's not doing that, I will apologize on behalf of anyone who's gone outside the lines. But to believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, that's your right. And what the leaders of Chick-fil-A want here is they don't want the LGBT ideology to influence government legislation that would force them and other people of more orthodox Christian religions to have their rights infringed upon. Even though Obergefell versus Hodges has passed and gay marriage is legal, the leaders of the LGBT agenda are still pushing further. They're pushing for Christian baker Jack Phillips to be forced to provide a custom cake for gay weddings. They've successfully stripped funding from Catholic orphanages because those orphanages believe that children should be raised by a mother and a father rather than a gay couple, and they're not stopping there. This movement was never just about letting people love who they love and letting people do what they want in the bedroom. If it was just that, it's not as big of a deal. But for the leaders of this movement, it's about slandering all opposing viewpoints into silence, if not pressuring them to change their views entirely, which has also happened quite a bit. Tying this idea back to the whole diversity and inclusivity idea, I'd like to ask, where is it? Where is this diversity and inclusivity? There's biological diversity and inclusivity, but there's no intellectual diversity and inclusivity and tolerance. One of my favorite public figures who's addressed this idea is Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin hosts his own YouTube show that's really popular called The Rubin Report, where he talks with a number of big public figures to talk about culture and politics. He's also done a really interesting video on this specific topic of diversity and tolerance for PragerU. And in that video, he says this, quote, if you only tolerate ideas that you already agree with, then you aren't really tolerating, close quote. Also of note, if you're not familiar with Dave Rubin is a gay married man. He's socially liberal on a lot of topics. He supports abortion up through 20 weeks. But even still, he recognizes that the leaders of the LGBT agenda are pushing for things that are completely out of line. So, in response to the New Yorker's comments this week, he said, quote, I ate there last time I was in New York City and will go back next time I'm in the area. That spicy chicken sandwich is delicious and you people are ridiculous. So, though he is a secular-minded person, Dave Rubin has some really interesting thoughts on these issues, and he shows a great example of real diversity on his show, and there's a lot of interesting things there. So we'll throw a link to his show in the YouTube notes so that you can go check him out as well. I highly recommend it. Also this week, short little tidbit here, but Planned Parenthood is calling the governor of Tennessee racist. I forgot to mention this earlier. So they're calling the governor of Tennessee racist for cutting funding to Planned Parenthood. Racist. See, here's the issue with this. Okay, the pro-life issue is about, is it a baby or not? Does the baby have rights or not? Race is not part of the issue. That's not part of the motivation for the pro-life position. So furthermore, when you take anyone who you disagree with on any topic whatsoever and just throw that racist label on them, you totally cheapen the evil of actual racists like Richard Spencer and those other people. Totally cheapens the evil when you put the governor of Tennessee in the same bucket with him. Totally cheapens it. Also, furthermore, I was at the Walk for Life in San Francisco. I'm pretty sure there were more Hispanics there than Caucasians. So, identity politics debunked. Thanks for watching the Catholic Millennial Show. Just this week we got a new shipment of our brand spanking new Catholic Millennial wordmark stickers and our Catholic Millennial St. Michael logo stickers and some 3x5 foot Vatican flags. Pretty dang cool. You can receive these rewards as well as insider news and other rewards by supporting us on Patreon. After this week, we've almost reached our first fundraising goal of $20 a month to cover all of our internet operation costs. Once that's covered, we can move towards even more awesome projects and stuff to help you defend your faith in the modern world. So if you're interested, please click the Patreon link attached to this video or go to CatholicMillennialBlog.com/Patreon. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you back here next week. God bless.